Last year, the space industry reached a global annual spending of $469 billion. This is more than the GDP of most countries, and the craziest part about it all is that 77% of all of this spending came from the commercial side of the industry. For decades, anything space related was handled by space agencies that were government sponsored, like NASA as an example. And now we're at a level where it's completely flip-flopped, where in the first half of 2022, 1,022 spacecraft have already been launched into space, of which 958 of those spacecraft have been from the commercial side. So almost entirely coming from the commercial space industry. Well, in retrospect, it shouldn't really come as a surprise that this is the current reality we are in today. It is worth noting that this is where the world is headed in terms of the new leading edge in technology when it comes to space. And a lot of companies and specific individuals like Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson and Elon Musk are investing into the space industry to make it more commercialized. So while we have Richard Branson and Virgin Galactic, as well as Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin competing for the space tourism industry, we have Elon Musk and SpaceX competing for the colonization of Mars by building their Starship space colonizing fleet. These are all very strong indicators that show a growing interest from the public sector as well as investors in the space economy. So in today's video, we are going to break down the new space economy and what it means for the future. So before we dive into space colonization, space construction, manufacturing, and mining, we're first going to start with space tourism. Right now, today, space tourism is very expensive and pretty much reserved for the top 1% of people who live on this planet who can afford up to $40 million just to be able to take a flight into space on a commercial space line like Blue Origin. So today you pretty much either secure government funding or subsidies from programs like NASA or some other government organization, or you go through someone like Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin, which is pretty much reserved for the ultra rich. And it was first last year that Jeff Bezos opened up his space program by flying into space with 3 other people in the last year. And this was marked as the first crewed flight of New Shepard, which was manned by 4 people total. And since that first flight, over 26 people have already gone into space using the New Shepard as their vessel. And while some are on donated seats like Wally Funk, others are paying up to $40 million just to be on one of these flights. Similarly, from SpaceX, Yusaku Maezawa, I'm probably saying their name totally wrong, so forgive me, and Elon Musk are both working on a project to do a lunar landing on the tourism side of space. This program is heavily sponsored by Masaaki Yuzawa, who is a very wealthy individual and would be the first space tourism flight to the moon. Now, while we are seeing all of these rich people and billionaires basically be able to go into space in the current day or even near future, it doesn't really stop there because these early people are the ones paving the way for a lower cost commercialized version of space tourism. So in the future, we will see space tourism go much lower in cost as all of these early tests and experiments in space tourism figure out the most efficient way to actually achieve this objective of going into space, taking people reliably and safely on a trip to explore an unknown world. Now, while it's pretty nice to see that there's a tourism industry in the economics of space, the real money to be made and where the bulk of spending, I believe, is going to go is in this whole concept of space colonization. If you think about it, going back through our entire history of humanity, this would be one of the most monumental eras in all of history where humans colonize another planet and grow a greater population outside of Earth. And of course, the notorious SpaceX has their eyes on the red planet, Mars, and the amazing goal set to colonize over 1 million people on Mars by 2050. That's just less than 30 years away, and depending how old you are when you're watching this video, you're probably going to be alive alive when this happens. And the first flight to Mars from SpaceX, with the help of NASA training a flight crew, is going to happen as early as 2030, which is just in the next 8 to 10 years. And in order to achieve this massive goal of getting 1 million people to Mars by 2050, SpaceX is planning on building 1,000 starships in the next 10 years. So if you think about all of the logistics that are required to execute on the mission of getting 1 million people over to Mars, we have to think about all of the different factors that come into play. So if we factor in the supplies that are needed to make that roughly 6-month trip from Earth to Mars, some of the facilities that are used to develop the materials that will be built on Mars, the machinery, the equipment used to colonize Mars, and then even more importantly, just the factories used to build all of these starships, we're definitely going to see a lot of development in this industry in order for SpaceX to hit this goal. And a specific example of this is SpaceX's spaceport in Boca Chica, Texas, which is the first of its kind space starship manufacturing facility that can produce starships on a mass scale. But that's just to get people from Earth to Mars. We have to think about what happens when they arrive there and all of the stops that they may or may not make along the way in order to arrive successfully. That's what leads us to the next topic: space construction and mining. If we factor in all of the costs associated with transporting humans from Earth to Mars, we really start to realize that it's a very expensive process. So when it comes to building a colony on Mars, there's obviously going to be a lot of push to create structures using the natural resources available perhaps on Mars or nearby. So because of this, there's obviously going to have to be some sort of a push to build structures on Mars using its natural resources, which takes into account the concept of space mining. Maybe the mining won't happen on Mars, it could happen on the moon or other planets, but there are already companies starting to enter the space mining industry. Companies like iSpace, Offworld, TransAstra, Gateway Spaceport, Shackleton Energy Company, and Asteroid Mining Corporation are all examples of either mining or construction companies that are thinking about how to do certain processes on another planet or in space that are currently done using heavy machinery on Earth today. The space mining industry alone is expected to grow to be over $2.4 billion. But to be honest, if we think about this number in terms of the size of the universe, this number is obviously going to grow far beyond that in time. Now, if we think about how it works to mine materials on Earth here today, there's obviously an entire ecosystem or set of logistics that have been built out to allow someone to pull a material out of the earth and bring it to an end customer. So just like it happens on Earth today, the same thing is going to have to happen in space, meaning that there will have to be logistics set up where there may be mining vessels or spaceships that help do some of the mining itself, other vessels that help transport the mined material to perhaps a hub somewhere on its way back to Earth, and then of course more vessels that help transport material from that hub down back to Earth. Now, one of the most impressive examples of space construction that I've seen so far is this company called Gateway Spaceport LLC. They made a really cool YouTube video that explained in significant detail the plans that they have to capture this space construction industry, and a really cool call to action at the end where they ask Elon Musk to partner together. I'll link the video down below in case you'd like to watch. I thought it was really interesting. But these guys are basically building spaceports, space construction machines, and so many more pieces of equipment you wouldn't really even think of that will be needed to create constructions in space without having to build something on Earth and then fly it up into space. Another example of an economy created in the space industry is with space factories. So if we think about how goods are manufactured today on Earth, there's this thing called gravity that's in the equation. Now, the idea is that if you take gravity out of the equation, you're able to manufacture much higher quality goods and be able to achieve a much better end result. So examples of products that might be manufactured in space would be a 3D printed heart chamber that would be transplanted into another person, or even fiber optic cables, which can have defective crystals causing signal disruption. If you do it in space, you're able to do a much better job manufacturing these types of goods. So obviously the economics just have to make more sense, and that is why the space industry, I think, is being so heavily invested in, because once the economics make sense, people who figure out the right technologies to execute in this arena are the ones who are going to win big with superior products, goods, and services prices that people will want more than goods that might be manufactured on Earth. So of course, this is another industry that will see growth in the coming years and is really just getting started. So I wanted to end the video with painting this really fascinating picture. If you think about how the world is today, a lot of companies rely on the internet to operate. And that invention only really started to take off and be adopted by the masses 30, 40 years ago. So if we fast forward 30, 40 years into the future, it's possible that, like how the majority of companies are dependent on the internet today, the majority of companies could very well be dependent on space and space technologies. And that 30 to 40 year timeline isn't even accounting for the fact that we live in an exponential era where things are moving at a faster and faster rate every year. It was only 100 years ago that the radio was first invented. And now we live in this era where we have VR technologies and new technologies coming out all the time that are changing the way we live our lives. So I guess just reflecting on all the things we talked about today, I think it'll be really interesting to see the next 20 to 30 years and where space takes us. And most importantly, keeping in mind the fact that space, whether it's something that you intend to participate or not, it's going to impact various economies here on Earth, because to create all of these amazing new technologies and constructions out in space, there's going to be a domino effect that creates more opportunities here on Earth. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe. And also, if you're really interested in this concept of keeping up with the latest technologies, we do have a free Slack group that you can join to understand how new technologies and exponential frameworks are shaping the future in business, health, relationships, and so much more. So if you want to join that, like I said, it's currently free. I'll just leave a link down below in the description and we'll see you in there. Once again, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.